A desperate wail pierced the dusty afternoon air of Scottsbluff, Nebraska, as Katherine Taylor clutched her infant son to her breast, trying to shield him from the cruel stares of the crowd gathered at the auction block. The year was 1875, and Katherine, once the cherished daughter of a prosperous rancher, now stood as merchandise to be sold to the highest bidder, her life and dignity reduced to a dollar amount called out by the red-faced auctioneer. "What am I bid for this fine worker?" "Young, strong, comes with a healthy boy child," the auctioneer bellowed, gesturing at Katherine as if she were livestock. "Bidding starts at $15. Katherine's eyes burned with tears she refused to let fall. Just 3 months ago, she had been a new bride filled with hope. Then typhoid had claimed her husband, James, leaving her with crushing debt and a newborn son. Her father-in-law, consumed by grief and whiskey, had decided to sell the farm and her along with it to cover his gambling debts. In the chaos of the frontier, with no family of her own left alive, Katherine had no legal recourse. $20, called a gravelly voice from the crowd. $25, countered another. Katherine's milk let down at that moment, responding to her baby's hungry cries despite her terror. She adjusted her shawl to nurse him discreetly, earning disgusted looks from the respectable ladies in town who had never lifted a finger to help her. "She's feeding that brat right here in public. $30, but only if you separate them." "I need a housekeeper, not a wet nurse," called out Silas Jenkins, the owner of the local saloon. His calculating eyes roved over Katherine's figure in a way that made her stomach clench. "No," Katherine cried out, clutching her son tighter. "Please, I beg you, $50, came a firm voice from the back of the crowd. The bidders parted, revealing a tall man in a dusty black hat and long coat. He stepped forward, spurs jingling against the wooden platform as he approached. $50 for the woman and her child, together. The crowd murmured. The man was known to most Quentin Calloway, a rancher from the North Valley who kept mostly to himself. His cattle operation was modest but growing, and rumors about his past followed him like shadows. $55, Jenkins countered, his face reddening. $100, Quentin said without hesitation, his voice level but with an edge of steel beneath it. He stepped closer, his blue eyes fixing on Katherine's face for the first time. Something flickered there, not pity, but a quiet, burning anger that wasn't directed at her. The auctioneer's gavel hovered in the air as Jenkins opened his mouth to continue, then thought better of it. Everyone knew Quentin Calloway was a crack shot and not a man to be trifled with. Sold, to Mr. Calloway for $100. Katherine stood frozen, her baby still nursing at her breast, as Quentin approached and handed the auctioneer a stack of bills. Then he turned to her, his expression softening just slightly. "You'll feed that child in peace now, madam," he said quietly, removing his coat and draping it around her shoulders to provide privacy. "My wagon's this way, if you'd care to follow." Katherine clutched her son with one hand and gathered Quentin's coat around herself with the other. She had no choice but to follow, yet something about his gesture of protection made her wonder if perhaps she had just been saved rather than purchased. Quentin led her to a modest but well-maintained wagon, helping her climb up without ever attempting to take her child. Once she was settled on the bench seat, he handed her a canteen of water. "My ranch is about 3 hours' ride from here," he explained, climbing up beside her but maintaining a respectful distance. "It's not much, but you'll have your own room with a lock on the door, the child too." Katherine studied him warily. "Why did you buy us, Mr. Calloway?" Quentin's jaw tightened as he set the horses in motion. "I didn't buy you, madam. I paid your debt to free you. There's a difference." He glanced at her, then back to the road. "My mother was sold at auction after my father died." No one stepped in for her. He paused, the weight of unspoken history hanging between them. "I'm offering you employment, Mrs. Taylor," she supplied. "Katherine Taylor, and this is William." She adjusted the now sleeping infant in her arms, Mrs. Taylor. "I need help with cooking and keeping house. In exchange, you'll have room, board, fair wages, and no one will separate you from your son." His hands were steady on the reins. "If you wish to leave once we arrive, I'll drive you to the next town over." You'll be free to go your own way with enough money to start fresh. Catherine's throat tightened with emotion she couldn't afford to show. You would do that for a stranger. I would do that because it's right, he replied simply. As they left Scottsbluff behind, Catherine felt something she hadn't experienced in months, the faintest flicker of hope. The journey to Quentin's ranch passed in relative silence, broken only by William's occasional fussing and Catherine's soft murmurs to calm him. The Nebraska landscape rolled by vast prairies giving way to more rugged terrain as they traveled north. Catherine observed her buyer know, her employer from beneath lowered lashes. Quentin Calloway was perhaps 30 years of age, with sun-weathered skin and dark hair that curled slightly at his collar. His hands were calloused, his posture straight, and his profile suggested a man accustomed to solitude. "Your son," Quentin said suddenly, breaking the long silence. "How old is he?" "Just over 2 months," Catherine replied, adjusting the sleeping infant. "He was born a week before my husband died." Quentin nodded, his expression revealing nothing. "You'll find some baby things at the ranch, cradle, blankets. They belonged to my sister's child before they moved to Oregon Territory last year." "That's very kind," Catherine said, surprised by this thoughtfulness. "It's practical," he corrected, though without harshness. "A child needs proper things." As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, the wagon crested a hill, revealing a modest but well-kept ranch spread out before them. A sturdy 2-story house of timber and stone stood at the center, flanked by a large barn, several outbuildings, and corrals containing horses and cattle. A creek wound through the property, lined with cottonwoods that provided welcome shade. "It's lovely," Catherine said honestly, taking in the peaceful scene. Something that might have been pride flickered across Quentin's face. "Built it myself, most of it, 5 years of work." He guided the wagon to the house and helped Catherine down, still careful not to touch her more than necessary. As they approached the porch, the front door swung open to reveal an older woman with silver-streaked dark hair and a kind, weathered face. "Mrs. Abernathy," Quentin called. "This is Mrs. Taylor and her son William. They'll be staying with us." The woman's eyebrows rose slightly, but she smiled warmly. "Welcome, Mrs. Taylor. I'm Eleanor Abernathy, the housekeeper, or I was until now, I suppose. Mrs. Abernathy will be returning to town tomorrow," Quentin explained. "Her daughter's expecting a child and she's needed there." Understanding dawned on Catherine. She wasn't replacing a fired employee but filling a necessary vacancy. Something inside her relaxed slightly. Eleanor led them inside, where a simple but comfortable home awaited. The furnishings were practical rather than decorative, but everything was clean and well maintained. "Your room is upstairs, first door on the right," Eleanor said. "There's a small adjoining room perfect for the little one. Bathrooms at the end of the hall. We've got running water from the windmill pump, which is more than most have out here." Catherine followed the older woman up the stairs, acutely aware of Quentin remaining below. The bedroom was spacious and airy, with a large bed, a dresser, and a rocking chair by the window that overlooked the creek. The promised lock was indeed on the door, a sturdy bolt that could only be secured from inside. The adjacent room was smaller but just as pleasant, with a wooden cradle and a chest that, when opened, revealed neatly folded baby clothes and blankets. "Mr. Calloway had me prepare these rooms last week when he heard about your situation," Eleanor said quietly. Catherine turned to her in surprise. "He knew about me before today," Eleanor's expression softened. "News travels fast in these parts. When word reached us about James Taylor's widow being sold to cover debts, well..." She straightened a blanket unnecessarily. "Mr. Calloway has strong feelings about such things. His own mother." "He mentioned something about that," Catherine prompted when Eleanor trailed off. "Not my story to tell," the housekeeper said firmly, "but know this, you're safe here. Quentin Calloway is many things, but he's an honorable man." After Eleanor left to prepare dinner, Catherine sat in the rocking chair, nursing William and contemplating her drastically changed circumstances. The events of the day seemed almost unreal. The humiliation of standing on that auction block transformed into this unexpected reprieve. She had no illusions about her position. Katherine knew that in the eyes of the law, she was still essentially Quentin's property until he formally released her from the debt. Yet he had spoken of employment, wages, and freedom to leave if she chose. It was more than she could have hoped for this morning. Dinner that evening was a simple but hearty affair of beef stew, cornbread, and apple pie. Quentin ate quickly and spoke little, answering Aliner's chatty questions about the cattle and avoiding looking directly at Katherine. After the meal, he excused himself to check on a pregnant mare in the barn. "Don't mind him," Aliner said as they washed dishes together, William sleeping in a basket nearby. "He's not used to company, especially female company, been alone too long. How long have you worked for him?" Katherine asked. 4 years, came out after my husband died. Quentin needed help and I needed work." Aliner handed her a plate to dry. "He's never brought anyone home before, not like this." Katherine felt her cheeks warm. "It's not like that. He made it clear this was an employment arrangement." Aliner's knowing smile suggested she had her own thoughts on the matter, but she simply said, "Of course." That night, despite her exhaustion, Katherine lay awake in the unfamiliar bed, listening to the night sounds of the ranch, the distant lowing of cattle, the whisper of wind through the cottonwoods. And occasionally, the sound of footsteps on the porch below as Quentin made his final rounds before retiring. She found herself wondering about this enigmatic man who had spent $100, a small fortune, to rescue a stranger and her infant son. With William sleeping peacefully in his cradle for perhaps the first time since his birth, Katherine finally allowed her own tears to fall not from despair, but from the overwhelming relief of finding sanctuary when she had expected only further suffering. Morning came with golden sunlight streaming through the curtains and the smell of coffee and bacon wafting up the stairs. Katherine dressed quickly, fed William, and descended to the kitchen to find Aliner already preparing breakfast while Quentin sat at the table reading a newspaper. He stood when she entered, that old-fashioned courtesy seeming at odds with his rugged appearance. "Mrs. Taylor, I trust you slept well." "Very well, thank you," she replied, settling William in the basket Aliner had brought down for him. "I've written out your duties," Quentin said, sliding a paper across the table, "and your wages. If anything seems unfair, we can discuss it." Katherine scanned the document, her eyes widening at the listed salary, $15 a month plus room and board, nearly double what most housekeepers earned. The duties were straightforward: cooking, cleaning, laundry, tending the kitchen garden, and basic mending. Nothing about personal services that might have made her uncomfortable. "This is more than generous," she said honestly. Quentin merely nodded. "I expect fair work for fair pay. You're free to take time as needed for your son, of course." After breakfast, Aliner departed for town in the wagon with Quentin, leaving Katherine to familiarize herself with the house. She spent the morning exploring her new domain, finding it well-stocked but in need of a woman's touch. The pantry was organized with a bachelor's practicality rather than a cook's intuition. The linen closet similarly reflected a man's priorities: plenty of clean bedding, but folded with military precision rather than arranged by type. Katherine set to work, rearranging the kitchen to better suit meal preparation while William napped in his basket. She discovered a neglected herb garden outside the kitchen door and made mental notes about what could be salvaged and what would need replanting. By mid-afternoon, she had prepared a venison stew and was kneading dough for fresh bread when she heard the wagon return. Through the window, she watched Quentin help Aliner down and carry her bag to the waiting buckboard of a middle-aged man Katherine didn't recognize, presumably Aliner's son-in-law. After goodbyes were exchanged and Aliner departed, Quentin entered the kitchen, removing his hat and hanging it on a peg by the door. "Something smells good," he said, washing his hands at the pump sink. "Venison stew," Katherine replied. "I found it in the cold room. Shot that buck myself last week." He glanced at the bread dough she was shaping. "You didn't have to do all this on your first day." "I prefer keeping busy," Katherine said simply, not mentioning that work kept her mind off the circumstances that had brought her here. Quentin seemed about to say something else when William awoke with a hungry cry. Catherine automatically moved to pick him up, but hesitated, looking down at her flour-covered hands. "May I?" Quentin asked unexpectedly, already moving toward the basket. Surprised, Catherine nodded. With unexpected gentleness, Quentin lifted the fussing infant, supporting his head properly as he brought him to Catherine. "You've held babies before," she observed as she took William. "My sister's children," he replied, turning away to give her privacy as she settled in a chair to nurse. "3 of them before they moved west." Catherine studied his broad back as he busied himself at the stove, stirring the stew. "Mr. Calloway, Quentin," he interrupted. "If we're to live under the same roof, Mr. Calloway seems overly formal." "Quentin," she amended. "I haven't properly thanked you for what you did yesterday." His shoulders stiffened slightly. "No thanks necessary. Nevertheless, you have my gratitude. What would have happened to William and me otherwise?" She couldn't finish the thought. Quentin turned, his blue eyes meeting hers directly for perhaps the first time. No child should be separated from his mother. No woman should be sold like property. There was a quiet intensity in his voice that spoke of personal pain. "I had the means to prevent it, that's all." That night established a pattern that would continue in the days and weeks to follow. They would share meals, exchange necessary conversation about the running of the house and ranch, and then Quentin would retreat to his study or the barn while Catherine tended to William and her household duties. Gradually, Catherine began to learn more about her enigmatic employer through observation and the occasional comment from ranch hands who came to the house for meals. Quentin had come to Nebraska 6 years earlier with little more than a wagon, 2 horses, and a small herd of cattle. Through hard work and shrewd trading, he had built the modestly successful operation that now ran 50 head of cattle and bred some of the finest horses in the county. What remained a mystery was his past before Nebraska, though Catherine gathered it involved somewhere further east, perhaps Kentucky or Tennessee, based on the slight accent that emerged when he was tired or angry. The story about his mother seemed to be true, as several old-timers mentioned it in passing, though always falling silent when they realized Catherine was listening. As April turned to May, the prairie erupted in wildflowers, and Catherine found herself settling into a routine that, while demanding, offered more peace than she had known in years. William thrived, growing plumper and more alert each day. To her surprise, Quentin took an interest in the baby, sometimes holding him in the evenings so Catherine could have a few moments to herself. One such evening, about a month after her arrival, Catherine returned from a rare, solitary walk to find Quentin on the porch swing, William sleeping against his broad chest. The sight made her pause at the bottom of the steps, a strange ache forming somewhere beneath her ribs. "He fell asleep while I was telling him about breaking the new colt," Quentin explained in a low voice. "Hope you don't mind." "Not at all," Catherine replied, settling beside him on the swing. "He seems to like you." "Babies are good judges of character," Quentin said with the ghost of a smile. "Or so my mother always claimed." It was the perfect opening, and Catherine took it before she could reconsider. "Will you tell me about her, your mother?" The swing's gentle motions stopped as Quentin went still. For a moment she thought he would refuse or simply leave, but then he began speaking in a quiet, measured voice. "Her name was Sarah. My father was a horse trader in Kentucky. Good man, but not careful with money. When I was 12, he took sick with pneumonia and died within a week." His hand absently patted William's back as the baby sighed in his sleep. "Left debts we didn't know about. Men came and took everything, the house, the horses, even my mother's wedding ring." Catherine's hand moved involuntarily to cover his where it rested on the swing between them. He glanced at it but didn't pull away. "They put her up for auction in the town square. I tried to stop it, fought so hard they had to tie me to a hitching post to make me watch." His voice remained steady, but the muscle in his jaw twitched. "A man named Blackburn bought her. Owned a saloon 2 counties over." "What happened?" Catherine asked softly. "I followed on foot. Took me 3 days when I found her." He finally withdrew his hand from under hers to brush back William's downy hair. She'd already tried to run away once. He'd broken her arm as punishment. Catherine felt sick. "Did you get her out, eventually? Worked for him cleaning stables, saving every penny, took me 8 months to buy her freedom. His eyes, when they met Catherine's, held both old pain and a fierce pride. We headed west after that. She died of typhoid in Missouri when I was 17. I'm so sorry, Catherine whispered. Quentin nodded once, acknowledging her sympathy. When I heard about your situation, a widow with a newborn being sold to cover a dead man's debts, it was like seeing it all happen again. He carefully transferred the still sleeping William to her arms. Some things shouldn't be allowed to repeat. As he stood to go inside, Catherine called softly after him, "Thank you for telling me." He paused at the door. "Thank you for asking." Then he was gone, leaving Catherine with her sleeping son and a new understanding of the man who had rescued them. June brought scorching heat to the Nebraska prairie, transforming the lush spring landscape into a more subdued palette of golds and browns. The work on the ranch intensified as Quentin and his 2 hired hands brothers named Isaac and Samuel Wilson prepared for the summer cattle drive to the railhead in Cheyenne. Catherine found herself busier than ever, preserving the early garden bounty, preparing extra provisions for the men to take on the drive, and managing the household in the sweltering heat. William, now nearly 5 months old, was becoming more active, requiring constant attention when he wasn't napping. Despite the demanding schedule, Catherine realized she felt more content than she had in years. The ranch had become home in a way that even her late husband's farm never had. There, she had always felt like a guest in her father-in-law's house. Here, Quentin had gradually ceded control of the domestic sphere entirely to her judgment, trusting her decisions about everything from meal planning to which furniture needed replacing. Their relationship had evolved as well. The cautious formality of those first weeks had given way to a comfortable companionship. They still maintained proper boundaries. Quentin never entered her room, and Catherine was careful to respect his privacy, but the evenings often found them sharing the porch swing, talking about the day's events or sometimes just sitting in companionable silence as the sun set over the prairie. Catherine found herself watching him more often, the way his hands moved confidently over a horse's flank, how his rare smile transformed his serious face, the gentleness he showed with William that contradicted his otherwise reserved demeanor. Sometimes she caught him watching her too, his blue eyes quickly glancing away when she noticed. These observations stirred feelings Catherine had thought buried with James, a warmth that had nothing to do with the summer heat, a quickening of her pulse when Quentin entered a room. She tried to dismiss these sensations as mere gratitude or the natural response to male attention after months of widowhood, but in her heart, she knew it was more. Such thoughts were dangerous. Catherine reminded herself daily of her precarious position. While Quentin treated her with unfailing respect, the fact remained that legally he held power over her future. The money he had paid at the auction represented a debt she had no realistic way to repay, despite the fair wages he provided. More importantly, she had William to consider. Her son's welfare had to come before any foolish romantic notions. The day before Quentin was to leave for the cattle drive, Catherine was hanging laundry in the yard when the sound of angry voices drew her attention to the corral. Quentin and Samuel Wilson appeared to be in a heated argument, with Isaac trying unsuccessfully to intervene. "You've got no right," Samuel shouted, his face flushed with anger. "That land belongs to my family." "The deed says otherwise," Quentin replied, his voice controlled but tight with tension. "I bought it fair and square from the bank after your father defaulted on the loan. Because you refused to extend credit at the general store." Samuel took a threatening step forward. "You knew exactly what you were doing, Calloway." Catherine moved closer, William propped on her hip. She had never seen Quentin truly angry before, but she recognized the dangerous stillness that had come over him now. "Your father gambled away your family's future, Wilson." "Not me," Quentin said evenly. "I offered him work here when no one else would hire him. I'm offering you and Isaac the same courtesy." "Keep your charity," Samuel spat, "and watch your back on the drive. Accidents happen on the trail." Before Quentin could respond, Samuel caught sight of Catherine watching. His expression shifted to something that made her instinctively hold William tighter. "Well, if it isn't the auction block bride," he said with a nasty smile. "Tell me, Mrs. Taylor, did you know your benefactor here is the reason half the small ranchers in the county lost their land? Man's got a talent for profiting from other folks' misfortune." "That's enough, Sam," Isaac warned, grabbing his brother's arm. "You're drunk, let's go." "Is that how he got you too?" Samuel continued, ignoring his brother. "Waited until you were desperate, then swooped in to play hero." Quentin moved with surprising speed for such a large man. One moment he was standing several feet away, the next he had Samuel by the collar, lifting him nearly off his feet. "You will apologize to Mrs. Taylor," he said, his voice deadly quiet. "Then you will collect your belongings and be off my land by sundown." For a tense moment, Katherine thought Samuel might fight back, then the younger man's shoulders slumped. "I apologize for my crude remarks, madam," he muttered, not meeting her eyes. "No offense intended." Quentin released him with a slight push. "Isaac, get your brother sobered up. If he's fit to ride tomorrow, he can still earn his pay on the drive. If not, you both collect your wages and find work elsewhere." After the brothers departed, Quentin remained standing with his back to Katherine, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. She approached cautiously, William babbling happily, unaware of the tension. "Are you all right?" she asked. "I should be asking you that," Quentin replied without turning. "I apologize for exposing you to that scene." "Is what he said true?" The question slipped out before Katherine could reconsider. Now Quentin did turn, his expression unreadable. "Which part?" "About you buying up land from failing ranchers." Something like disappointment flickered in his eyes. "Yes, the bank forecloses. I make an offer. It's business, Katherine." It was the first time he had used her given name, but the moment offered no pleasure. "Is that what I am too? Business?" The words burned her throat even as she spoke them. Quentin's face hardened. "You know better than that." "Do I?" Katherine shifted William to her other hip. "Perhaps Samuel is right. Perhaps you do have a talent for finding people at their most desperate." She regretted the words instantly, especially when she saw the flash of genuine hurt in Quentin's eyes before his expression closed off completely. "I'll be leaving at first light tomorrow," he said stiffly. "The drive should take 3 weeks, weather permitting. Isaac will remain here to help with anything you need." He turned to go, then paused. "When I return, if you wish to leave, I'll arrange transportation to wherever you want to go. Your debt to me is considered paid in full." Before Katherine could respond, he strode away toward the barn, his back straight and unyielding. She stood holding William, the damp laundry forgotten on the line, feeling as though she had just made a terrible mistake but unsure how to fix it. That evening, Quentin didn't come in for dinner. Isaac reported that he was camping with the herd to get an early start. Katherine went to bed with an ache in her chest that had nothing to do with physical pain. The next 3 weeks were the longest of Katherine's life. The ranch seemed unnaturally quiet without Quentin's presence. She performed her duties mechanically, taking no joy in the tasks that had previously given her satisfaction. Even William seemed to sense the change, becoming fussier and sleeping poorly. Isaac Wilson proved to be a respectful and hardworking young man, nothing like his volatile brother. He kept to himself mostly, tending the remaining stock and fixing things around the property that Quentin hadn't had time to address before leaving. "Mr. Calloway's a good man," Isaac said one evening as Katherine handed him a plate of food on the porch, where he preferred to eat. "My brother's got a temper and a taste for whiskey, makes him say things he shouldn't." Katherine nodded noncommittally, but Isaac continued, "Our pa was a drunk, lost everything because of it, not because of Mr. Calloway. Truth is, Quentin gave him more chances than anyone else would have." "Why are you telling me this?" Katherine asked. Isaac shrugged. "Just figured you should know Mr. Calloway doesn't defend himself much. Never has." He looked out toward the horizon. "Folks round here don't understand him. Think because he keeps to himself and does well that he must be taking advantage somehow." Katherine thought about this conversation often in the days that followed. She remembered the way Quentin had told her about his mother matter of fact, without self-pity or dramatic embellishment. She recalled his unfailing kindness to William, his quiet respect for her boundaries, the way he had consistently treated her as a person of value rather than a possession or servant. Had she judged him unfairly, allowing Samuel's bitter accusations to overshadow what she knew of Quentin's character? The possibility that she had wounded him deeply with her distrust made her stomach knot with regret. By the time the 3 weeks were drawing to a close, Katherine had made her decision. She would stay if Quentin still wanted her to. She would apologize and try to rebuild the easy companionship they had begun to develop. Beyond that, she dared not plan, but she knew with certainty that she wasn't ready to leave the ranch or the man who had given her a second chance at life. The cattle drive was due back on a Tuesday in early July. Katherine spent Monday cleaning the house from top to bottom, preparing Quentin's favorite meal of beef roast and apple pie, and even cutting fresh wildflowers for the table. She wanted everything to be perfect for his return. Tuesday dawned clear and hot. Katherine dressed with special care in her best dress, a simple blue cotton that brought out the color of her eyes. She arranged her honey-brown hair in a neat bun, even pinching her cheeks for color, before laughing at her own foolishness. By mid-afternoon, there was still no sign of the returning drive. Katherine kept busy, but found herself checking the road with increasing frequency as the hours passed. William, picking up on her anxiety, became cranky and difficult to settle. Evening came and still no sign of Quentin or the herd. Katherine fed William and put him to bed, then returned to the porch to continue her vigil. Isaac, returning from checking the outlying pastures, stopped to speak with her. Could be they got delayed crossing the river, he offered. Or maybe they got a good price and celebrated in town before heading back. Katherine nodded, though the suggestion of Quentin carousing in Cheyenne didn't align with what she knew of him. I'm sure you're right. I'll leave a plate for him in the warming oven. But Quentin didn't return that night, nor the next morning. By noon on Wednesday, Katherine was truly worried. She was debating whether to ask Isaac to ride toward Cheyenne to look for the drive when she heard the sound of hooves approaching, not the thunder of a returning herd, but the steady rhythm of a single rider pushing hard. She rushed to the porch, her heart leaping at the thought of seeing Quentin again, then plummeting when she recognized Samuel Wilson's lanky form astride an exhausted horse. Isaac emerged from the barn, his expression changing from surprise to concern when he saw his brother's state. Samuel's clothes were dirty and torn, his face haggard with exhaustion. "Sam, what happened? Where are the others?" Isaac called, hurrying to help his brother dismount. Samuel's eyes met Katherine's, and something in them made her blood run cold. "There was an accident," he said hoarsely. "Rustlers hit us 2 days out from Cheyenne. Calloway went after them when they scattered the herd." He swallowed hard. "Found him yesterday morning. He'd been shot." The world seemed to tilt beneath Katherine's feet. She gripped the porch railing to steady herself. "Is he?" "He's alive," Samuel said quickly, "but it's bad. They took him to the doctor in Scottsbluff. I rode ahead to tell you. I need to go to him," Katherine said, already turning toward the house. "Isaac, can you hitch the wagon? I'll get William ready." "Mrs. Taylor," Samuel called, stopping her. "There's something else you should know." His face was grim. "The marshal in Cheyenne seems to think it wasn't rustlers. Says it looks like someone from the drive tried to kill him." Katherine's eyes widened. "Who would?" She stopped, remembering Samuel's threat before they left. "You." Samuel shook his head vehemently. "I know what you're thinking, but I swear it wasn't me. I was with the chuck wagon when it happened. Ask anyone. Then who? Don't know, but the marshal's investigating until they find out who did it." He glanced at his brother. "Nobody's above suspicion." Within an hour, Katherine was in the wagon heading toward Scottsbluff, William secured in a makeshift sling across her chest. She had packed hastily, bringing only essentials and leaving Isaac in charge of the ranch. Samuel had stayed behind as well, partly to rest his exhausted horse and partly, Katherine suspected, because Isaac didn't entirely trust him alone on the property. The journey to town seemed endless. The summer sun beat down mercilessly, and dust from the dry road coated Katherine's skin and clothes. William fussed in the heat despite her efforts to keep him comfortable, but the physical discomforts paled beside the fear gnawing at her heart. Her last words to Quentin had been accusations born of mistrust. If he died believing she thought the worst of him, Katherine would never forgive herself. It was nearly sunset when she reached Scottsbluff. The town had grown considerably since she'd last seen it, though the memory of standing on the auction block still made her shudder as she passed the town square. The doctor's office was on the main street, a modest building with a shingle announcing Dr. Thomas Wells, physician and surgeon. Katherine tied the wagon horses to the hitching post and hurried inside, William still sleeping against her chest. A harried-looking woman in an apron greeted her in the small waiting area. "Can I help you?" "I'm looking for Quentin Calloway," Katherine said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I was told he was brought here with a gunshot wound." The woman's expression softened with recognition. "You must be Mrs. Taylor, the ranch housekeeper." When Katherine nodded, she continued, "He's in the back. Doctor just finished changing his bandages." She hesitated. "He's been asking for you." The words sent a surge of hope through Katherine. "May I see him?" "Of course, this way." The woman led her through a door into a narrow hallway with several rooms off it. She stopped at the last one. "He's lost a lot of blood and the fever's been high. Don't be alarmed by his appearance." Nothing could have prepared Katherine for the sight that greeted her. Quentin lay motionless on a narrow bed, his skin ashen against the white sheets. A bandage wrapped his bare torso, a spot of red seeping through on his right side. His breathing was shallow and labored, his eyes closed. "Quentin." She whispered, approaching the bed, his eyelids fluttered, then opened. For a moment his gaze seemed unfocused, then it sharpened as he recognized her. "Katherine," he rasped. "You came." She sank into the chair beside the bed, relief making her knees weak. "Of course I came." She shifted William so Quentin could see the baby. "We both did." A ghost of a smile touched Quentin's pale lips. "The boy's grown. Children do that," she said, trying to match his light tone despite the tears threatening to fall. "Especially when they're well fed and loved." Quentin's hand moved slightly on the sheet and Katherine took it without hesitation. His skin felt hot with fever. "I'm sorry," she said, the words tumbling out in a rush. "What I said before you left, I didn't mean it. I know you're not like that. I was just scared," Quentin finished for her. "I understand. Been alone too long myself. Makes it hard to trust." His fingers tightened weakly around hers. "But I need you to trust me now." "I do," she said immediately. His eyes held hers intently. "Someone from the drive tried to kill me, might try again. Samuel told us." Quentin's expression darkened. "Samuel, did he come to the ranch?" "Yes, to tell us what happened. He said he was with the chuck wagon when you were shot." "Maybe." Quentin tried to shift position and winced. "Don't trust him, Katherine, or Isaac, not until we know more." Before Katherine could respond, the door opened to admit a middle-aged man with spectacles and a serious expression. Dr. Wells, presumably. "Mrs. Taylor," he acknowledged with a nod. "I need to examine my patient now. Perhaps you could wait outside." Katherine reluctantly released Quentin's hand. "I'll be right outside," she promised. In the hallway, the doctor's wife, Mrs. Wells, as she introduced herself, offered to hold William while Katherine freshened up. There was a small washroom where she could clean the dust from her face and hands, and Mrs. Wells provided a cool drink of water. "How bad is it?" Katherine asked when she returned, taking William back. Mrs. Wells sighed. "The bullet missed his vital organs, but it did considerable damage to the muscle in his side, and he's lost so much blood." She patted Katherine's arm. "My husband is an excellent doctor, though. If anyone can pull him through, Thomas can." Dr. Wells emerged from the sick room a short time later. "He's sleeping now," he told Katherine. "The fever's concerning, but we're doing everything possible to bring it down." "May I stay with him?" Katherine asked. The doctor exchanged a glance with his wife. "We don't normally allow it, but in this case," he nodded. "There's a cot in the room you can use. Mrs. Wells can help you settle the baby." For the next 3 days, Katherine rarely left Quentin's side. The fever raged, sometimes causing him to drift into delirium where he called out in fear or anger, often about his mother, occasionally about the cattle drive. During his lucid moments, he would ask about William or the ranch, never about his own condition. On the afternoon of the 3rd day, Marshal Harrington from Cheyenne arrived to question Quentin. Katherine reluctantly left the room during their conversation, but the lawman sought her out afterward. Mrs. Taylor, I understand you've been caring for Mr. Calloway, he said, studying her with keen eyes. That's right, she confirmed. I work as his housekeeper. The marshal nodded thoughtfully. Mr. Calloway speaks highly of you, says you're to be trusted completely. Katherine felt warmth bloom in her chest at the words. What did he tell you about the shooting? Not much he hadn't already said. He was checking on strays when he was shot from behind. Marshal Harrington frowned. Coward's way to do it. Do you have any suspects? Several of the drovers had opportunity. The Wilson brothers had motive, especially Samuel, given their argument before the drive. He removed his hat, turning it in his hands, but without witnesses or evidence, it's a difficult case. What happens now? Katherine asked. I'm continuing my investigation. In the meantime, the marshal regarded her seriously. I'd advise caution, madam. If someone wanted Mr. Calloway dead, they might not stop at one attempt. The warning sent a chill through Katherine, but she straightened her shoulders and nodded. I understand. Thank you, Marshal. That evening, Quentin's fever finally broke. Katherine had been sponging his forehead with cool water when she noticed the change. His breathing became deeper and more regular, his skin less burning to the touch. When his eyes opened, they were clear for the first time since she'd arrived. You're still here, he murmured, his voice rough but stronger. Katherine smiled, relief making her light-headed. I told you I would be. Quentin's gaze moved to William, sleeping in a makeshift cradle the doctor's wife had arranged. Both of you. He looked back at Katherine, his expression softening. I heard you singing to him last night. Your voice is beautiful. Katherine blushed, unaware he had been conscious enough to hear her lullabies. My mother taught me those songs. Tell me about her, Quentin requested, about your family. Perhaps it was exhaustion loosening her usual reserve, or maybe it was the near loss of this man who had come to mean so much to her, but Katherine found herself speaking more freely than she had in years. My mother was a schoolteacher before she married. She came west from Boston, full of ideas about educating frontier children. Katherine smiled at the memory. She met my father when he came to build the schoolhouse in their settlement. He was a carpenter originally, though he later turned to farming. Where was this? Quentin asked, his eyes never leaving her face. Missouri, near Independence. They were happy there, I think, until the fever took them both when I was 16. She looked down at her hands. I went to live with my aunt in Kansas after that. That's where I met James, my husband. Was it a good marriage? Quentin asked, then immediately shook his head. Forgive me, that's too personal a question. No, it's all right, Katherine considered how to answer honestly. James was a kind man, not passionate or particularly ambitious, but steady and gentle. His father was the opposite, harsh, demanding, always dissatisfied. When James died, I lost my only ally in that house. Quentin's hand found hers on the edge of the bed. I'm sorry you suffered. Everyone suffers, Katherine said simply. What matters is what we do afterward. His fingers tightened around hers. Katherine, when I'm well enough to travel, the door opened before he could finish, revealing Dr. Wells with a tray of medicines. Katherine reluctantly withdrew her hand, wondering what Quentin had been about to say. As Quentin's condition improved over the following days, Katherine began to consider their return to the ranch. The doctor estimated another week of recovery before his patient could safely travel, and even then, Quentin would need careful nursing for some time. Marshal Harrington had returned to Cheyenne to continue his investigation, but not before warning Katherine again to be vigilant. The attempted murderer was still at large, possibly still in the area, and might make another attempt on Quentin's life. This concern weighed heavily on her mind as she sat on a bench outside the doctor's office one afternoon, enjoying the fresh air while William napped beside her in a borrowed basket. The main street of Scottsbluff bustled with activity, merchants hawking their wares, farmers bringing produce to market, children playing in the dusty road. Mrs. Taylor, Katherine looked up to see a well-dressed older man standing before her. His expensive suit and gold watch chain marked him as a man of means, but it was his eyes, a familiar shade of blue, that caught her attention. Yes, she replied cautiously. "Forgive the intrusion. I'm Edward Calloway, Quentin's uncle." The man removed his hat. "I've just arrived from St. Louis after receiving word of his injury." Katherine studied him with surprise. Quentin had never mentioned family beyond his deceased mother and the sister who had moved to Oregon. "I wasn't aware Mr. Calloway had relatives in St. Louis." Something flickered in Edward Calloway's expression, displeasure, perhaps. "My nephew and I have been estranged for some years. A disagreement over family matters." He gestured to the bench. "May I join you?" Katherine nodded, though something about the man made her uneasy. "How did you hear about Quentin's condition?" "I maintain business interests throughout the region. News travels." Edward settled beside her, his gaze dropping to William. "And who is this fine young man?" "My son, William." Edward's eyebrows rose slightly. "I see, and his father?" "Died before he was born," Katherine replied shortly, disliking the implication in the man's tone. "How unfortunate." Edward studied her with calculated interest. "And you work for my nephew, I understand." "Yes, as his housekeeper." "Only as his housekeeper?" The question carried an unmistakable insinuation. Katherine stiffened. "Mr. Calloway has been nothing but respectful and honorable in all his dealings with me, sir." Edward smiled thinly. "Of course, I meant no offense." He changed tack smoothly. "How serious is Quentin's injury?" The reports I received were somewhat alarming. Despite her instinctive distrust, Katherine saw no reason to withhold this information. "He was shot in the side. He lost a great deal of blood and developed a fever, but the doctor believes he will recover fully with time and proper care." "Excellent news." Edward nodded, appearing genuinely relieved. "Is he receiving visitors? I would like to see him." Katherine hesitated. Quentin had never spoken of this uncle, and their estrangement suggested a complicated relationship at best. "He's resting now, but I can ask if he feels up to company when he wakes." "I would appreciate that." Edward stood, replacing his hat. "I'll be at the hotel. Please tell Quentin that I've come with a proposition that might interest him, a chance to put the past behind us." As Edward Calloway walked away, Katherine gathered William and returned to Quentin's room, troubled by the encounter. The older Calloway had seemed polite enough on the surface, but she had sensed calculation beneath his concern. Quentin was awake when she entered, propped up against pillows and looking markedly better than he had even that morning. His color had improved, and some of the strain had left his face. "You look worried," he observed as she settled William in his cradle. Katherine sat beside the bed, debating how to broach the subject. "I just met someone who claims to be your uncle, Edward Calloway." The change in Quentin was immediate and alarming. His body tensed, and his face hardened into an expression she had never seen before. Cold fury mingled with something like fear. "He's here, in Scottsbluff." Quentin tried to sit up straighter and winced at the pain the movement caused. "Be careful," Katherine admonished, helping him adjust his position. "Yes, he said he just arrived from St. Louis after hearing about your injury." Quentin's laugh held no humor. "I'm sure he did." He met Katherine's concerned gaze. "My uncle is not a good man, Katherine." "Not someone you want to associate with." He mentioned you were estranged. "That's one way to put it." Quentin's hands fisted in the sheets. "Did he say what he wants to see you?" "He said he has a proposition that might interest you, a chance to put the past behind you," were his words. Quentin was silent for a long moment, his expression distant. "My uncle owned the saloon where my mother was kept," he finally said, his voice flat. "He was the man who bought her at auction, his own sister-in-law." Katherine gasped, horrified by the revelation. "But you said a man named Blackburn." "Edward Calloway and Edward Blackburn are the same man. He used his mother's maiden name in Kentucky to avoid association with certain business dealings." Quentin's eyes were hard as flint. "After my mother died, he tried to force me into working for him permanently, said I owed him for the years he provided for us." "What happened?" Katherine asked softly. "I left in the night, made my way west, changed my name back to Calloway once I was far enough away." A muscle worked in Quentin's jaw. "Haven't seen or spoken to him in 13 years. Katherine's mind raced as she processed this information. "Could he be connected to your shooting?" Quentin considered this, then shook his head. I doubt it. Edward's methods are more subtle. He doesn't get his hands dirty directly. His expression darkened. But his arrival now can't be coincidence. What should I do if he approaches me again? Stay away from him, Quentin said firmly, and keep William away too. Edward has a talent for finding people's weaknesses and exploiting them. He reached for her hand. Promise me you'll be careful. I promise, Katherine assured him, squeezing his fingers. But what about you? He wants to see you, and I have no desire to see him. Quentin sighed, weariness evident in his face. But I know my uncle. He won't leave until he gets what he wants. Dr. Wells chose that moment to enter for his evening examination, ending their conversation. But as Katherine sat with William in the small adjoining room while the doctor changed Quentin's bandages, she couldn't shake the feeling that Edward Calloway's arrival had introduced a new and dangerous element to their already precarious situation. The next morning, Katherine was preparing to take William for a short walk when there was a knock at the door of the small room Dr. Wells had provided for her. Expecting the doctor's wife, she was surprised to find Isaac Wilson standing in the hallway, hat in hand. "Isaac, what are you doing here?" "Came to check on Mr. Calloway, madam," the young man replied, shifting uncomfortably, "and to bring news from the ranch." Katherine studied him warily, remembering Quentin's warning not to trust either Wilson brother. "What news?" "Samuel's gone missing," Isaac said bluntly. "Rode out the day after I last saw you, saying he was going to help the other drovers bring the rest of the herd home. But Jenkins, one of the hands, arrived yesterday saying they never saw Sam." A chill ran down Katherine's spine. "Have you told the marshal?" "Sent word to Cheyenne," Isaac confirmed, "but I thought Mr. Calloway should know." He glanced past her toward the closed door of Quentin's sick room. "How is he?" "Improving," Katherine said, not elaborating further. "I'll tell him you came by." Isaac nodded, accepting her implicit refusal to let him see Quentin. "There's something else, Mrs. Taylor." He lowered his voice. "A man's been asking questions at the ranch. Fancy Eastern clothes, said he was Mr. Calloway's uncle." Katherine's grip tightened on the doorframe. "When was this?" "2 days ago. I didn't tell him much, didn't like the look of him." Isaac twisted his hat nervously. Did I do right? Despite her reservations about Isaac, Katherine felt a surge of gratitude for his discretion. "Yes, you did. That man, he's not what he seems." Isaac nodded as if this confirmed his own suspicions. "I'll keep an eye out if he returns, and I'll send word if Samuel shows up." After Isaac left, Katherine immediately went to inform Quentin of these developments. He was sitting up in bed, attempting to feed himself the bland porridge that constituted his breakfast, and looking thoroughly frustrated by the limitation of his injury. "Let me help," Katherine offered, taking the spoon from his unresisting fingers. "I hate being weak," he muttered, but allowed her assistance. "Healing isn't weakness," she countered gently. "It's necessary." As she fed him, Katherine related Isaac's visit and the news about Samuel's disappearance. Quentin listened intently, his expression growing more troubled with each detail. "I don't like this," he said when she finished. "Samuel vanishing, Edward appearing at the ranch. It's too coordinated." "You think they're working together?" Katherine asked, surprised. Quentin shook his head. "Not necessarily, but my uncle doesn't make moves without careful planning. If he went to the ranch, he had a reason. What could he want after all these years? That's what worries me." Quentin pushed the remainder of the porridge away, his appetite gone. "Edward never does anything without profit in mind. Whatever he's after, it's not family reconciliation." Before they could discuss it further, a commotion in the outer office caught their attention. Raised voices, one of them distinctly Edward Calloway's, argued with Dr. Wells. "I insist on seeing my nephew," Edward was saying. "Family has rights in these matters." "Your nephew is my patient," Dr. Wells replied firmly, "and I determine who sees him based on his condition and wishes." The door opened suddenly, revealing Edward flanked by a stone-faced Marshal Harrington who had apparently returned from Cheyenne. Behind them stood Dr. Wells, looking deeply displeased by the intrusion. "I apologize for the interruption," Marshal Harrington said, tipping his hat to Katherine. "Mr. Calloway, I have some questions that can't wait," Quentin nodded, though his eyes remained fixed on his uncle. Marshall, Uncle Edward. Edward stepped forward, his expression a practiced mask of concern. Quentin, you're looking better than I expected, given the reports of your condition. Sorry to disappoint you, Quentin replied dryly. The older man's smile tightened. Always the same sharp tongue, some things never change. He glanced at Katherine. I see Mrs. Taylor has been taking good care of you. Why are you here, Edward? Quentin asked bluntly. We haven't spoken in 13 years, bit late for a family reunion. Edward sighed theatrically. Can't an uncle be concerned about his only nephew? When I heard you'd been shot, cut the act, Quentin interrupted. What do you want? Marshall Harrington cleared his throat. Perhaps I should conduct my questioning first. He turned to Katherine. Mrs. Taylor, would you mind giving us a moment? Katherine looked to Quentin, who gave her a slight nod. I'll be right outside, she assured him, gathering William from his cradle. As she left the room, she heard Edward say, Devoted, isn't she? You always did have a way with the ladies, Quentin. The door closed before she could hear Quentin's response, but his uncle's insinuating tone made her face burn with anger. Katherine paced the small waiting area, trying to soothe William, who had begun to fuss, while straining to hear the conversation within. The raised voices suggested a heated discussion, but the thick door prevented her from making out specific words. Nearly half an hour passed before the door reopened. Marshall Harrington emerged first, his expression grave. Edward followed, looking smug in a way that made Katherine's unease deepen. Dr. Wells ushered them both toward the exit, then returned to Katherine. Mr. Calloway is asking for you, he said quietly. He's quite agitated. Try not to let him overexert himself. Katherine hurried into the sick room to find Quentin sitting fully upright, his face flushed with anger. He was attempting to swing his legs over the side of the bed when she entered. What are you doing? She exclaimed, rushing to stop him. You'll tear your stitches. I need to get back to the ranch, Quentin said through gritted teeth. Now, Katherine placed William in his cradle, then gently but firmly pressed Quentin back against the pillows. Not until you tell me what's happening. What did the marshal say? What does your uncle want? For a moment, she thought he might resist, but then the fight seemed to drain out of him. Quentin slumped back, wincing as the movement pulled at his wound. Samuel Wilson has been arrested for my attempted murder, he said wearily. Katherine blinked in surprise. They found him, where, in Cheyenne, trying to sell some of my cattle, had forged papers claiming ownership. Quentin ran a hand over his face. He confessed to shooting me, but claims it wasn't his idea. A cold feeling settled in Katherine's stomach. Whose idea was it then? He says it was Isaac's plan, that Isaac wanted revenge for their father losing the land. Quentin's expression was troubled, but something doesn't add up. Samuel's the hothead, not Isaac. What about your uncle? What did he want? A muscle twitched in Quentin's jaw. Edward claims he's dying, liver disease apparently, says he wants to make amends before he goes. His bitter laugh made clear what he thought of this explanation. He's offered to buy my ranch at twice its value. Katherine frowned. Why would he want your ranch? That's the question, isn't it? Quentin's eyes met hers. Edward never does anything without an angle. There must be something about that land he wants. Could there be gold? Katherine suggested, or coal? Possibly, but Edward's businesses were always more human-centered. Saloons, gambling houses, brothels. Quentin's expression darkened. Places where he could exploit people's weaknesses. Katherine mulled this over. What did you tell him? That the ranch isn't for sale at any price. Quentin reached for her hand. Katherine, I need you to do something for me. Anything, she replied without hesitation. Go back to the ranch, today if possible. Find Isaac and tell him what's happened with Samuel. Watch his reaction. Quentin's grip tightened. And look through my desk in the study. There's a false bottom in the top drawer. Inside is a deed to the mineral rights on the north section of the property separate from the land deed. Bring it back here. Katherine nodded, though the thought of leaving Quentin while he was still recovering and with his uncle in town filled her with anxiety. What about you? Will you be safe? I've asked Marshal Harrington to post a deputy outside my door. Quentin's lips curved in a grim smile. Edward may be devious, but even he won't try anything with the law present. Though reluctant, Katherine recognized the urgency in Quentin's request. She arranged with Dr. Wells to depart that afternoon, promising to return as quickly as possible. The doctor provided a jar of salve and fresh bandages for Quentin's wound, along with detailed instructions for changing the dressing. Before leaving, Katherine sat beside Quentin's bed, William dozing in her arms. "I'll be back by tomorrow evening," she promised. Quentin nodded, his eyes lingering on her face as if memorizing it. "Katherine, there's something I need to tell you. Tell me when I return," she interrupted softly. "It will give you an incentive to rest and heal." His smile was genuine this time. "You drive a hard bargain, Mrs. Taylor." "I've learned from the best, Mr. Calloway." She leaned forward impulsively and pressed a gentle kiss to his forehead. "Stay safe." The journey back to the ranch was tense. Katherine constantly looked over her shoulder, half expecting to see Samuel Wilson or some associate of Edward Calloway following her. William, sensing her anxiety, was unusually fussy, making the trip even more challenging. They arrived at the ranch in the late afternoon. The property appeared undisturbed, with horses grazing peacefully in the corral and smoke rising from the chimney of the main house, evidence that Isaac was there. Katherine approached cautiously, William secured in his sling against her chest. She called out as she neared the porch, not wanting to startle Isaac. "Hello, Isaac, it's Mrs. Taylor." The door opened to reveal Isaac Wilson, looking relieved to see her. "Mrs. Taylor, didn't expect you back so soon. How's Mr. Calloway?" "Improving," she said, studying his face carefully. "May I come in?" "Of course." Isaac stepped back, allowing her to enter. "I've kept things going best I can, even managed not to burn the biscuits this morning." The house was reasonably tidy, Katherine noted as she glanced around, though lacking the touches that made it feel like home. She settled William in his basket on the kitchen table, then turned to face Isaac directly. "Samuel has been arrested," she said without preamble, watching intently for his reaction. Isaac's face paled, but he didn't look surprised. "For shooting Mr. Calloway?" "Yes," he confessed. Katherine paused, then added, "He claims it was your idea, that you wanted revenge for your father losing the land." The color drained completely from Isaac's face. "That's a lie," he exclaimed, genuine shock in his voice. "I never. Sam and I argued about the land, sure, but I accepted what happened. Our pa drank and gambled away everything we had. That wasn't Mr. Calloway's fault." Katherine believed him. The raw hurt and betrayal in his expression couldn't be feigned. "If not you, then who put him up to it?" Isaac sank into a kitchen chair, running a hand through his hair. "I don't know. Sam's been different lately, secretive, disappearing for days, coming back with money I knew he hadn't earned honestly." He looked up at Katherine, his expression haunted. "About a month ago, I found him with a letter. When I asked about it, he got real defensive, said it was none of my business." "A letter from whom?" "Don't know, but after that is when he started talking about getting even with Mr. Calloway." Isaac shook his head miserably. "I should have warned him, never thought Sam would actually try to kill anyone." Katherine believed him. The raw distress in his voice couldn't be manufactured. "Quentin's uncle arrived in town the day after the shooting. Have you ever heard Samuel mention anyone named Edward Calloway or Edward Blackburn?" Isaac frowned in concentration. "Not that I recall." "But if this uncle is from back east, maybe he knew our pa. Pa spent some time in St. Louis before settling here. It was a connection Katherine hadn't considered." "Maybe," she acknowledged. "Isaac, I need to check something in Mr. Calloway's study. Will you keep an eye on William for a moment?" The young man nodded, seemingly relieved to have something to focus on besides his brother's betrayal. Katherine made her way to Quentin's study, a small room off the main parlor that she rarely entered. The desk was neat and organized, reflecting its owner's methodical nature. Following Quentin's instructions, she opened the top drawer and felt along the bottom until she found a slight indentation. Pressing it revealed the false bottom, which lifted to expose a hidden compartment. Inside lay several documents, including the deed Quentin had mentioned. As she removed it, another paper caught her attention, a survey report dated just 3 months earlier. Curious, Katherine unfolded it and scanned the contents. Her eyes widened as she read. The report detailed significant silver deposits in the north section of the property, precisely the area covered by the mineral rights deed. Suddenly, Edward Calloway's interest in the ranch made perfect sense. He must have somehow learned about the silver. But how? The survey appeared to be private, commissioned by Quentin himself and seen by no one else, according to the surveyor's notes. Unless. Katherine thought back to what Isaac had said about Samuel receiving mysterious letters and money. Could Edward have been corresponding with Samuel, paying him for information about the ranch and eventually convincing him to eliminate Quentin? Katherine gathered the documents and returned to the kitchen, where Isaac was awkwardly attempting to soothe a fussing William. "I need to return to town immediately," she told him, taking the baby back. "There's something Mr. Calloway needs to see." Isaac nodded, still looking shaken by the news of his brother's arrest. "I'll hitch the wagon for you." "Thank you, and Isaac." Katherine hesitated. "I believe you had nothing to do with the shooting." "I'll tell Mr. Calloway and the marshal what you've said." Relief flashed across the young man's face. "I appreciate that, madam. I may not always have agreed with Mr. Calloway's business decisions, but I'd never wish him harm." As Isaac prepared the wagon, Katherine quickly gathered a few necessities for herself and William. The afternoon was waning, and she was reluctant to travel after dark, but the information she had discovered seemed too important to delay. Just as she was securing William in his traveling basket, the sound of approaching horses made her pause. Through the window, she saw 3 riders approaching the house Edward Calloway, flanked by 2 rough-looking men she didn't recognize. "Isaac," she called urgently. "Mr. Calloway's uncle is coming with company." Isaac hurried to the window, his expression hardening when he saw the visitors. "Those men with him, they're not from around here. Gunmen, by the look of them." Katherine's heart raced. "Is the wagon ready?" "Yes, but they'll see you leaving." Isaac glanced around the kitchen, thinking quickly. "The cellar, you can hide there with William while I talk to them." "I can't leave you to face them alone," Katherine protested. "Better me than you and the baby," Isaac insisted. "I'll keep them occupied, find out what they want. Once they're gone, you can head to town." Katherine realized he was right. With William to protect, confronting armed men wasn't an option. She followed Isaac to the trapdoor in the pantry floor, descending with William into the cool darkness of the root cellar. Isaac handed down a lantern. "Stay quiet," he whispered. "I'll get rid of them as quickly as I can." The cellar door closed, leaving Katherine and William in the dim lantern light among shelves of preserved foods and sacks of potatoes. She could hear muffled voices above as Isaac greeted the visitors, then the sound of boots on the wooden floor as they entered the house. William began to fuss, and Katherine frantically tried to quiet him, terrified his cries would give away their hiding place. She nursed him, grateful when he settled into contented silence. The voices above grew louder, more heated. Though she couldn't make out exact words, the tone suggested an argument. Then came a sound that made her blood freeze, the unmistakable report of a gunshot, followed by a heavy thud. Katherine pressed a hand over her mouth to stifle a gasp. Had they shot Isaac? Fear paralyzed her momentarily, then gave way to desperate calculation. If they searched the house, she and William would be discovered. The cellar had no exit except the trapdoor. Footsteps moved across the floor above, coming closer to the pantry. Katherine extinguished the lantern and retreated to the darkest corner of the cellar, holding William tightly against her chest and praying he wouldn't cry. The trapdoor creaked. Light spilled down as it opened, and a man's silhouette appeared at the top of the ladder. "Mrs. Taylor," Isaac's voice called softly. "It's safe now." Relief flooded through her. "Isaac, what happened? I heard a shot." "One of them tried to draw on me. I was faster." His voice was grim. "Come up quickly. We need to leave now." Katherine climbed the ladder awkwardly with William in one arm, emerging into the pantry to find Isaac pale but unharmed. He helped her the last few steps, then led her through the kitchen toward the front door. "Where's Edward and the other man?" she asked, looking around nervously. "Edward's tied up in the barn. The other one ran when I shot his partner." Isaac gestured toward the parlor, where Katherine glimpsed the still form of a man on the floor. "I got lucky, very lucky." Outside, the wagon was ready. Isaac helped Katherine and William up, then climbed into the driver's seat. "I'll take you to town," he said, snapping the reins. "It's not safe here anymore." As they pulled away from the ranch, Katherine clutched William and the precious documents to her chest, her mind racing. "Did Edward say what he wanted?" Isaac nodded grimly. "The mineral rights to the north section, said he knew there was silver there. When I told him I didn't have any legal rights to the property, he ordered those men to search the house." He glanced back at the receding buildings. "That's when things went bad." "How did he know about the silver?" Katherine asked, though she was beginning to suspect the answer. Said Samuel told him. Isaac's voice cracked slightly. "Apparently my brother's been working for him for months, feeding him information about Mr. Calloway's business." He shook his head in disgust. "For money, just like our father." The connection was finally clear. Edward had recruited Samuel as an informant, eventually convincing him to kill Quentin when the opportunity arose. With Quentin dead and no direct heirs, Edward, as his only living relative, would have had a strong claim to the property, including the valuable silver deposits. They reached Scottsbluff just as full dark descended. The town was quiet, most businesses closed for the night. Isaac drove directly to the doctor's office, where a deputy still stood guard outside Quentin's room. Dr. Wells met them in the waiting area, looking concerned by their disheveled appearance and obvious distress. "Mrs. Taylor, what's happened? Is Mr. Calloway awake?" Katherine asked urgently. "I need to see him. He's resting, but yes, he's awake." The doctor glanced at Isaac. "Who's this?" "Isaac Wilson," Katherine explained. "He works at the ranch. He's just saved William and me from Edward Calloway and his men." This statement was enough to convince Dr. Wells to admit them both to Quentin's room, though he insisted they keep the visit brief. "He's still recovering. Too much excitement could cause a setback." Quentin was sitting up in bed reading when they entered. He looked markedly better than when Katherine had left him. Some color had returned to his face, and his eyes were alert. Those eyes widened with alarm when he saw their state. "Katherine, Isaac, what's happened?" He set aside his book, attempting to sit up straighter. Katherine quickly related everything: the discovery of the silver survey, Edward's arrival at the ranch with hired guns, Isaac's brave intervention, and their narrow escape. As she spoke, Quentin's expression darkened from concern to cold fury. "Where's Edward now?" he demanded when she finished. "Tied up in your barn," Isaac replied. "But he won't stay that way for long. The ropes weren't that secure, and his other man is still out there." Quentin nodded grimly. "We need to alert Marshal Harrington." He looked at the deputy standing by the door. "Can you fetch him?" "This can't wait until morning." While the deputy hurried to find the marshal, Katherine gave Quentin the mineral rights deed and survey report. He examined them briefly, then set them aside. "I had the survey done after finding traces of silver while digging a new well," he explained. "Kept it quiet while I secured separate mineral rights. Didn't want a rush of prospectors trampling my grazing land." His expression softened as he looked at Katherine. "I was planning to develop it slowly, properly, build something that would last." The way he said it, something in his voice and eyes, made Katherine wonder if he wasn't talking about more than just the mine. Marshal Harrington arrived shortly, listening gravely to their account of events at the ranch. When they finished, he turned to Isaac. "You're sure the man you shot was working for Edward Calloway?" Isaac nodded. "Heard Mr. Calloway call him by name, Johnson or Johnstone, something like that." The marshal's eyebrows rose. "Clyde Johnston, tall fellow with a scar on his chin. That's him," Isaac confirmed. "He's wanted in 3 territories," Marshal Harrington said grimly. "Gun for hire." He turned to Quentin. "Looks like your uncle's gotten himself into serious trouble this time. Conspiracy to commit murder, attempted kidnapping, hiring known criminals." He shook his head. "Even with his connections, he'll have a hard time wriggling out of this one." "If you catch him," Quentin pointed out, "Edward's resourceful. He won't wait around to be arrested." "I'll send men to the ranch tonight," the marshal assured him, "and wire the surrounding towns to be on the lookout." He glanced at Katherine and William. "In the meantime, I suggest you folks stay here in town where it's safer, at least until we've apprehended Edward and his remaining associate." After the marshal departed with Isaac to give a formal statement, Katherine settled in the chair beside Quentin's bed, William sleeping peacefully in her arms. The events of the day had left her exhausted, but her mind was too active for sleep. "You should rest," Quentin told her gently. "You've been through a lot today." "So have you," she countered. "How are you feeling?" "Truly, better, stronger." His eyes held hers. "Especially now that you're back." The simple statement warmed her more than it should have. "I was worried about leaving you." "I was more worried about you," Quentin admitted, "when I realized Edward might go to the ranch." He trailed off, his hand finding hers on the edge of the bed. "Katherine, before all this happened, I was planning to ask you something." Her heart quickened. "What was that?" "Whether you might consider staying at the ranch permanently, not as my housekeeper, but—" He hesitated, uncharacteristically uncertain. "I know it hasn't been long since your husband passed, and I don't expect—" "Yes," Katherine interrupted softly. Quentin blinked. "Yes, I'll stay." She squeezed his hand. "These past months at the ranch have been the happiest of my life, despite everything. You gave William and me a home when we had nothing. You treated us with respect and kindness." Her voice wavered slightly. "You made me feel safe when I'd forgotten what that felt like." Quentin lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "I never expected to find someone like you, Katherine. After my mother died, I closed myself off. It was easier than risking that kind of loss again." His blue eyes held a warmth she'd glimpsed only occasionally before. "But you and William, you've changed everything." "Is that why you took us in that day?" she asked. "Because we reminded you of your mother?" "At first, perhaps," he acknowledged, "but I stayed because of you. Your strength, your kindness, the way you care for your son, the way you transformed a house into a home." His thumb traced circles on her palm. "I love you, Katherine. I think I have almost from the beginning." The words she had scarcely allowed herself to hope for brought tears to her eyes. "I love you too," she whispered. "I've been afraid to admit it, even to myself. After James died and everything that followed, I didn't trust that I could have happiness again." "We both deserve happiness," Quentin said firmly, "and if you'll have me, I want to build that life with you." "With both of you?" He looked at William, sleeping peacefully in Katherine's arms. "I'd like to be a father to him, if you'll allow it." "He already loves you," Katherine said, smiling through her tears. "As do I." The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of activity. Marshal Harrington organized a search for Edward Calloway, eventually tracking him to a train bound for St. Louis. He was arrested and brought back to Scottsbluff to face charges of conspiracy to commit murder and hiring known criminals to intimidate and assault innocent citizens. Samuel Wilson confessed to his role in the shooting, confirming that Edward had paid him to kill Quentin after learning about the silver deposit. In exchange for his testimony against Edward, Samuel received a reduced sentence of 15 years rather than hanging. Isaac Wilson, exonerated of any involvement in the plot, remained at the ranch, taking on more responsibility as Quentin recovered. His quick thinking and courage in saving Katherine and William had earned him Quentin's trust and gratitude. By early August, Quentin was well enough to return home, though still moving carefully to protect his healing wound. Katherine had spent the intervening time dividing her attention between caring for him at Dr. Wells's office and making trips to the ranch to oversee its operations. Their return to the ranch was a quiet homecoming. Isaac had prepared the house, even placing wildflowers in vases throughout the rooms. Katherine felt a surge of emotion as they crossed the threshold. This was truly home now, in every sense of the word. That evening, after William had been put to bed, Quentin and Katherine sat together on the porch swing, watching the sunset paint the prairie in shades of gold and crimson. His arm rested comfortably around her shoulders, her head leaned against his chest. "I spoke with Reverend Patterson in town today," Quentin said, breaking a comfortable silence. "He's available to perform a ceremony next Sunday if that suits you." Katherine smiled. "Eager, Mr. Calloway, to make you my wife, absolutely." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "Unless you'd prefer to wait," she turned to face him, her expression serious. "I don't want to wait, but Quentin, there's something we should discuss first." She took a deep breath. The law still considers me your property in a sense because of how we met. I want us to start our marriage as equals. Quentin nodded, understanding her concern. I've already taken care of that. Before we left town, I had Judge Wilson draw up papers formally releasing you from any obligation related to that auction. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a folded document. You've been legally free since the day after I brought you home. I just never found the right time to tell you. Katherine took the paper with trembling fingers, reading the official declaration that confirmed what Quentin had just said. You did this months ago, before you even knew me. I told you that first day I didn't buy you, Katherine. I paid your debt to free you. His eyes held her steadily. I want a wife who chooses me freely, not one who feels obligated because of circumstances. Deeply moved, Katherine leaned in to kiss him a gentle meeting of lips that conveyed all the love and gratitude she felt. When they parted, she rested her forehead against his. Sunday sounds perfect. They were married in the small church in Scottsbluff on a bright August morning. Katherine wore a new dress of pale blue silk that Quentin had ordered specially from Denver. William, dressed in a tiny suit, was passed among the small gathering of well-wishers, mostly neighbors and townspeople, who had come to respect the quiet rancher and his bride. Isaac Wilson stood as Quentin's best man, looking uncomfortable but proud in his Sunday best. Dr. Wells and his wife attended, as did Marshall Harrington and several of the ranch hands. As they exchanged vows, Katherine thought back to that terrible day on the auction block, how lost and hopeless she had felt, how certain that her life and William's were ruined beyond salvation. She could never have imagined then that the tall, serious stranger who bid for them would become the center of her world, the man she would freely choose to spend her life with. When Reverend Patterson pronounced them husband and wife, Quentin's kiss was tender yet passionate, a promise of the life they would build together. The small congregation erupted in cheers and well wishes, William adding his own happy babble to the celebration. The months that followed were among the happiest of Katherine's life. Quentin began careful development of the silver deposit, using methods that minimized disruption to the ranchland. The resulting income allowed them to expand the ranch house, adding rooms for the family they hoped to grow and improving the facilities for the workers. Isaac Wilson was promoted to foreman, his steady reliability and loyalty making him invaluable to the operation. Under his guidance, the cattle herd flourished, and Quentin's reputation for breeding quality horses spread throughout the territory. Edward Calloway was convicted and sentenced to 20 years in the territorial prison. Though he promised vengeance, his threats rang hollow. His health was indeed failing, though not as rapidly as he had claimed, and few of his former associates were willing to maintain connections with a disgraced criminal. Winter came to Nebraska, transforming the prairie into a vast white expanse. Katherine found the quiet season especially precious, with long evenings spent by the fire, Quentin reading aloud while William played at their feet. It was during one such evening, with snow falling gently outside the windows, that Katherine shared her suspicion that they would soon be adding to their family. Quentin's response, a look of such pure joy followed by a kiss that left her breathless, confirmed that she had found the happiness she once thought forever lost. In May of 1876, almost exactly a year after Katherine had arrived at the ranch, she gave birth to a healthy son they named James Quentin Calloway. William, now nearly 18 months old, regarded his little brother with a mix of curiosity and proprietary pride, already taking his role as big brother seriously. As Katherine watched Quentin hold their newborn son, his expression one of wonder and love, she reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. From the humiliation of that auction block to the warmth and security of their home, from desperate strangers to a family bound by choice and love, it seemed almost miraculous. "What are you thinking?" Quentin asked, noticing her thoughtful expression. Katherine smiled, reaching out to take his hand. "I was thinking about what you said to me that first day. You'll feed that child in peace now. You kept your promise." Quentin leaned down to kiss her, their new son cradled between them, William clambering up to join the embrace. "And I always will," he murmured against her lips, "for all our days together." In the years that followed, the Calloway Ranch became one of the most prosperous in Nebraska territory. The silver mine provided wealth, but it was the family that gave meaning to that prosperity. Katherine and Quentin added 2 more children to their family, a daughter named Sarah after Quentin's mother, and another son they called Thomas. William grew into a thoughtful young man with his mother's compassion and his adoptive father's quiet strength. Though he knew the story of his birth and early months, he never doubted his place in the family. Quentin had legally adopted him on his 5th birthday, making official what had been true in their hearts from the beginning. Sometimes, on summer evenings when the children were asleep and the prairie stretched peaceful and golden before them, Katherine and Quentin would sit together on the porch swing, marveling at the life they had built from such unlikely beginnings. "You ever regret it?" Katherine asked once. "Spending $100 on a widow and her baby at an auction," Quentin's answer was a kiss that still, after all these years, made her heart race with joy. "Best investment I ever made," he said with a smile. "Though I didn't buy you, remember, I simply paid for the privilege of loving you." And in the home, they had created together a place of warmth, safety, and boundless love. Katherine knew that some debts could never truly be repaid, only passed forward in the legacy they left for their children and the community they had helped to build. The auction block that had once symbolized her deepest degradation had, by some miracle of fate and one man's compassion, led her to her greatest happiness. And the child she had clutched so desperately that day now ran free across the Nebraska prairie, secure in the knowledge that he was loved, protected, and free.